Local attorney and Daniel Island resident Shawn Pinkston has announced his candidacy for Charleston City Council's District 1 seat, which covers Daniel Island, King and Hoy, Rondo, and parts of downtown Charleston. I speak exclusively, Shawn, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Shawn Pinkston, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Quintin, it's always good to see you. It's been a while, but I'm glad to see you, and it looks like you're doing well.
I am indeed. I know that you're doing well in addition to this, because obviously you have thrown your hat, that is, into the ring for the District 1 seat for Charleston City Council. In fact, you sent the press release out a couple of days ago. You said this: Shawn Pinkston announced his candidacy for Charleston City Council District 1. Shawn Pinkston, a resident of Daniel Island, officially announced his candidacy for the special election for City Council District 1. You said this, quote, "Over the past year and a half, governments at nearly every level have overreached and have tried to exercise unprecedented control over our lives," unquote. Where exactly is the overreach in the city of Charleston?
Well, the city of Charleston implemented a mask ordinance, was one of the first instances, and it wasn't just a mask mandate. It criminalized the behavior. People were subject to fines for not wearing masks. And it wasn't just wearing masks in public places. It was not wearing masks in their own homes, and not wearing masks in their places of business, and not wearing masks in restaurants. So it wasn't just, hey, let's encourage people to wear a mask and let's, implement something in public buildings, which the city obviously can do since they control and own the buildings. But it was in places of worship. It was in places of business. And again, it was in our own home. You could have been fined for not wearing a mask in your own home if you were with someone who wasn't an immediate family member residing in the home. And that's what I reference when I talk about some of the government overreach. Right now, one of the major issues facing the city is with the vaccine mandate for city employees. And Quintin, this isn't an issue as to whether the city can implement a vaccine mandate. The courts have ruled on that. There's been a lawsuit, and it's going to continue to work its way up the courts. It's a question of should the city implement this sort of mandate that forces responders, the very people who were on the front lines a year and a half ago, to choose between their livelihoods or their liberty, making a decision, a very personal decision, as to whether the city employee should take the vaccine. And last that I heard was at the beginning of the month, there were about 80 people who were not in compliance, about 135 people who were not in compliance with the mayor's request. And of those, 80 were firefighters and first responders. We're already short on the number of police officers here in the city of Charleston. We have unfilled positions. It's been widely reported, and it's been an ongoing problem. And now we're talking about having more unfilled positions because we're putting police officers and firefighters and other first responders into the difficult position of having to choose between their livelihood or choosing between their liberty. Other instances include, again, talking about the mask mandate, when it was considered and it wasn't implemented, but it was requiring masks to be worn in public schools, which takes the choice out of parents' hands. And again, parents could have been fined for their 5-year-old child not wearing a mask in school, and it should be parents' decision. I have 4 kids. My wife, Andrea, and I were raising 4 kids, and it should be our decision as to whether our children wear masks in school, especially when you're talking about District 1, where you have a Berkeley County school district located within the city, and there was the talk and potential that mask mandate could have applied to the Daniel Island School, a Berkeley County school, as well as Bishop England, which is right here on Daniel Island, and requiring kids to wear a mask, which again takes that choice out of the hands of parents, which I oppose. I believe that it's parent choice, and that is their right, and it's their decision to make as it relates to their children.
Well, let me back it up. You talk about fines in homes. How many people got fined in their homes in the city of Charleston?
Well, I'm not sure that there were many people who did. I know that there were some businesses and restaurants, but the point is the ordinance was there. And whether it was enforced Again, why would you create an ordinance that then don't enforce? I know some restaurant owners were fined, and some of the restaurant owners and businesses had their day in court, and I'm assuming they paid their fine. So I don't think that there were many, and there may not. It may have been zero, but the point remains: why is the city enforcing or passing an ordinance that would fine citizens for conduct that occurs within their own homes as it relates to wearing a mask?
Now, Sean, I've read the ordinance from the city of Charleston many, many times, and in that it didn't say anything about homes. Where did you get your information from?
From the city's website, and I'll be happy to share with you afterwards regarding the mask ordinance from the city of Charleston website.
Now, with the mask mandate, let's go back to 2020, should have been a voluntary mask mandate.
That's my position. I believe that government can certainly encourage wearing of the mask. If businesses want to implement mask policies for people who come into their own places of business, that should be up to business owners. But again, to not just pass an ordinance that requires the wearing of a mask, but it's also the criminalizing of not wearing a mask. Again, you could be fined by, and they empowered certain livability workers to go ahead or to write the tickets and citations for people who were not wearing masks. So again, Quintin, it's not just a mask mandate. It's enforcing it with penalties as it relates to individuals not wearing a mask in, again, in places of work, in their own private offices, in restaurants and things of that nature. City wants to do it in public buildings. The city certainly can. But it's when it starts to infringe on people's individual liberties as it relates to wearing a mask and then criminalizing it by imposing a fine from a ticket that could be written by the various livability enforcement agents as codified in that ordinance.
Now, how many of those businesses last year got an actual fine from the city of Charleston?
Again, I'm not sure what those numbers are, Quintin. I'll be happy to that and share that number with you. Regardless of the numbers, again, it comes down to should that be the case, and I just oppose that particular provision within the mask mandate. I believe businesses should be able to make that decision as to whether they wanted their employees as well as their customers to wear a mask when they enter the premises of the business, rather than the city telling them that they had to. And then if the businesses didn't comply, then they faced fines from the city.
What position should the city take when it comes to, obviously, the vaccination mandates? Should it be a weekly test, or should it just be voluntary as far as vaccinations?
Well, I believe it should be voluntary. I believe it's a personal decision. It comes down to bodily autonomy. You have the right to make a decision as to whether you want to inject something in your body, a drug or a vaccine, whatever the case may be. And so it should be voluntary. And again, Quintin, it's not a matter of if the city can do it. I think the city can, and the courts have been pretty clear. We'll see what the appellate courts ultimately decide on that particular issue. It's whether the city should do it. And rather than the city encouraging individuals to get vaccinated or encouraging city employees to become vaccinated, they're mandating it, which again puts the city employee in the position of having to choose between their livelihood, providing for their family, or submitting to a mandate that requires them to take a vaccine that many of them don't. Again, there was a lawsuit with, I believe it was close to 80 employees of the city, many of them firefighters and police officers.
Yes, sir. What benefits should the city give to those people who choose not to get vaccinated?
I'm not sure what you mean by what benefits. I'm not sure I understand.
Instead of them losing their jobs, what should the cities do for them? How should the city work with those folks?
Well, I think the city can require testing.
That was my original question.
Right. So I think the city can, and again, I think those are accommodations that can be made for individuals who choose not to get, not to get vaccinated. I think that's the easiest approach. The city can pay for, pay for those tests and require employees to undergo them. I think there are ways to accommodate those who do not wish to become vaccinated, who don't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason. Again, it's a personal decision, it's a personal choice. And the city, rather than telling them your choices are get vaccinated or you're going to be terminated, I just think that's the wrong choice or the wrong message being sent by the city. And it's going to have an impact on city services. It's going to have an impact on public safety. We already have a number of unfilled police officer positions. So we already can't recruit and retain the number of police officers that the city has positions for. And now we're going to make it even more difficult by requiring a vaccine mandate all the while. Crime is spiking. It is up and downtown. It's up throughout the city. And so we're going to take more police officers off the street in addition to firefighters and other first responders.
Now, since the vaccine mandate that the city's obviously ordered, what has been the retention rate within the police and fire departments?
I'm not entirely, again, I have those statistics at hand. What I have been told from individuals within the city government is as of the beginning of the month, there were 135 individuals who were not in compliance at the beginning of the month. And of those 135, 80 of them were firefighters and police officers. So I don't know what the total number of city employees, what that number is, but whatever 135 would be as it relates to that total number, relates to the percentage. I believe it's pretty high. I think it's probably somewhere, I think what I've read in the newspaper, so that's my source of knowledge, is probably around 86%. I think that may be correct in terms of the number of employees who have vaccinated.
Let me turn back to your race. Obviously, for District 1, there are actually 5 people running for the race, including yourself. What is the quality of life right now in District 1 as you know it?
Well, I think the quality of life in District 1 overall is pretty good. Some of the things that need to be addressed in District 1 that would improve the quality of life include our roads. We have roads here on Daniel Island that are pocked full of potholes. They've had potholes for years. The road has not been repaved. There's major thoroughfares where roads have not been repaved. We have a bridge that connects Daniel Island to St. Thomas Island that leads to Clements Fair that was deemed structurally insufficient a couple years ago and still has a still late on it. Some of the other things so we have to replace that bridge. It's funny, the Ravenel Bridge was built in 4 years, and yet we can't get a small bridge that crosses a creek connecting Daniel Island to St. Thomas Island replaced in a few short years. The county has been great. The county has stepped up. Excuse me, Quintin. The county has stepped up and is paving one of the main roads here on Daniel Island up to the new traffic circle. I know you're familiar with the traffic circle. So the county has stepped up, and I'd like to thank our county councilman and county supervisor and other members of county council for allocating the funds, because those are major thoroughfares when people come on to Daniel Island, and they're widely used roads, and they ought to be repaved. Some of the other issues that would improve quality of life here in District 1 as it relates to Daniel Island and the Clements Ferry corridor would be pedestrian and bicycle paths that have long been in the works. We're talking 10 to 12 years. Some of these plans have been discussed, but they haven't been completed. And that would include a bicycle path connecting Clements Ferry to Daniel Island. As Clements Ferry was widened, right, there were plans for there to be sidewalks and pedestrian paths and bike paths along Clements Ferry. That hasn't occurred. I don't know if that's part of the long-term plan. The county is handling that, and the county did well on the second part of that widening. So those are just some of the issues here, downtown, Ansonboro and the French Quarter. Again, crime is up downtown. Tourism is down. So that's impacted the restaurants and some of the businesses downtown. I don't know if the city can necessarily do much about that because that was just, as we all know, due to the global pandemic. But we need to address crime in downtown and address public safety across the board because the statistics are up. There's no denying that the crime rate, both property and violent crime rates, are up, and we have to address that with public safety across the board.
How much has crime gone up in District 1 over the past year?
In District 1, I don't know if the city breaks it down in terms of the individual city districts. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I'll try to find out and share that information with you. Downtown, I believe that violent crime is up nearly 100% from last year. So those are the types of crimes that we have to address. The murder rate is up in downtown. So again, how it breaks down from district to district, again, I don't think the city maintains it in that form.
And I'm gonna get back to that in just a second. But how many infrastructure projects are going on right now in District 1?
Well, the major one is the widening of Clements Ferry Road, which again is a county project.
Yeah, Berkeley County.
The county, the Berkeley County is also repaving part of Daniel or Seven Farms Drive up to the traffic circle where it intersects Daniel Island Drive. There's some major private renovations going on. The tennis center here on Daniel Island is being renovated. Of course, that's a private renovation, but the city ought to encourage that by making sure that our roads leading into that particular attraction are taken care of, and again are just repaved so that we don't have potholes, so that our bridges are sound as people come on to Daniel Island. And then of course infrastructure downtown. There's major construction. A lot of that is private, but also some of the public drainage projects, things of that nature are occurring downtown. So those are some of the infrastructure projects that are currently undergoing or being undertaken here in District 1.
What is more important for District 1, Shawn? Building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing these existing homes?
I think that's there's a two-part answer to that. One, downtown in the Ansonboro area is going to be rehabbing because they're older homes. There's no space down there. The homes have been built out. Here on this side of the peninsula, Daniel Island and Clements Ferry, it's the development. It's creating the new homes or building the new homes, creating the new commercial districts, making sure that those commercial districts provide the services that the residents require. Here on Daniel Island, it's been built out for over the past 25 years or so. I think the Daniel Island Company has done a good job of maintaining the balance. There have been issues with the development here on Daniel Island, and citizens have come forth and voiced their concerns, and there have been concessions made, I believe, on both sides, which is really how the process should work. There's a major development that's in the works right now, a high density development here on Daniel Island that many of the residents didn't know about. Some of the residents posted a sign that they saw knocked over on a jogging path that talked about the variance hearing on that particular development that also included the cutting down of grand oaks here on Daniel Island. So it's those types of areas where the city should do everything it can to communicate with the residents on these types of high density employments. And again, take the input from the citizens, and let's work together to make sure that these new developments, especially the high density developments, address some of the concerns that affect the quality of life to include how traffic impacts the
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the screen cut went blank for a moment.
No worries.
How it impacts traffic and how it just overall impacts the quality of life. So again, I think it's a two-part answer to your question. I think it depends on the area of the district. Downtown is obviously rehab, and here in the Daniel Island Clements Ferry corridor, it's how do we manage that new growth?
Oh, I'm gonna get back to that in just a second. But where in the district do you identify and also develop those unique characteristics when it comes to residential, commercial, and mixed use?
Well, one of the major development areas is going to be the Clements Ferry corridor. Cane Hoy Plantation is the next major development being built, and Clements Ferry, as part of the master plan, talks about the highest parts of the city. Some of the highest land is located along the Clements Ferry corridor, but then as you get away from those spine of Clements Ferry Road,
Okay.
how it gets into low-lying areas. And we have to take into account, where is the rainwater going to go? How are we going to handle the drainage? How are we going to have those drainage projects constructed? And again, I think if you look at Daniel Island, which was a planned community, Cane Hoy is being a planned community, is how the developers work with the city to make sure that the infrastructure was in place as the community grew. And I think city council has a role in that, making sure that developers abide by the zoning requirements, making sure that when there are variance requests brought forth, that everyone is fully informed, that there's public input on any variances to those development plans, and then make sure that we don't develop in flood-prone areas, which again was one of the major recommendations from the comprehensive plan. And one of the issues that I would really like to see City Council take a firm stand on is eliminating fill and bill. I know it was a recommendation to work on that and to promote it within the comprehensive plan. There was an ordinance that was proposed, but that ordinance itself didn't pass. And I think that's one area that we just have to address, especially as it relates to some of the low-lying areas on the peninsula and in West Ashley when it comes to development.
And I'm having a little trouble hearing you a little bit, but I'll keep going. But let me ask you, how do you protect Cane Hoy?
Well, protected from what? I think that's a broad question. Cane Hoy is a unique area with low-lying areas and also some high areas. And I think what we focus on and what the city has proposed as part of its comprehensive plan is to make sure that that the development occurs on those higher ground areas, if you will, where the ground is just higher. There are there are historically Black communities along Clements Ferry corridor, and if you're asking about that particular issue, I believe that the city ought to do everything it can to preserve those areas. I know that Councilwoman Del Chapo, who resigned the seat, and we certainly wish her the best as she moves forward. But I know she worked hard on that, and I believe some of her recommendations were included in the city comprehensive plan. So I think those are the areas where, again, you have to make sure that the city is aware of those concerns, that the council member is in those communities talking to residents, and is then voicing those concerns whenever development issues come before the city.
How would you maintain and enhance the existing residential and commercial character of the district and provide for compatible, appropriate, and high-quality development and redevelopment?
Well, I think you just have to be mindful. The master plans have been submitted to the city council, and then you make sure that the development adheres to that master plan. And it's going to take a number of years. Daniel Island was 25 years in the making, and there's still construction going on here in Daniel Island, not so much on the residential side, other than some of the high-density developments that are being mentioned, apartments and condos and townhomes, things of that nature. And I think you have to do the same thing Clements Ferry corridor. downtown, you have to maintain the historic context of downtown, hand in hand with the development. And there's obviously concerns about traffic congestion. There's concerns about the what these high density areas do to the quality of life as it relates not just to traffic, but also to the number of people coming into the businesses and how those businesses will flourish. One area that I think addresses your question, City Council is going to hear a proposal on a tax district along King Street. Now, I don't know all the details about that, and it'll be interesting to see what those final details are and what the city, what the business owners want as it relates to tax districts that would benefit the community as a whole. And I think that's an excellent example of public-private partnerships where, again, you seek the input of the business owners and you make sure that the business owners want this particular project, in this case, a special tax district. And then how is the money collected from such a special tax district going to be spent? And let's make sure that it provides overall for the public good.
How do you help those local businesses boost their competitiveness among other businesses coming into your district?
Well, I think from a city perspective, it's, are there particular tax districts like the one that's being discussed there in downtown along King Street? Are there other subsidies that can be utilized to benefit some of the local businesses? One such business happens to be the Daniel Island Ferry, and which I think is a wonderful idea. The owners have done a wonderful job of promoting that and working with the city. And the city likewise has worked with the Daniel Island Ferry. But it's, how do we make that a truly viable option for public transportation? How do we make that affordable to the everyday commuter, not just the tourists who are coming into town? How can we increase dock space? How can we increase routes to address that particular issue? And how can we work with the business to make sure that that business is profitable and beneficial to the community as a whole? So I think tax incentives, tax districts, and things of that nature, if the businesses want them, it's one thing to talk about it and then try to implement it. If the businesses don't want it and the businesses aren't going to support it, we should force that on those individual businesses.
How would you create a business preservation alliance?
Well, again, are you talking about creating a preservation for local businesses versus out of state business coming in?
Oh yeah, created, yes, a business preservation alliance for those businesses that are already there.
Yeah, well, I think working with the Chamber of Commerce and working with the Visitor Center and working with other areas, with other already created, established agencies within the city to promote local industry, to promote local businesses. I don't know if we need to create new government entities just for the sake of creating new government entities. There are certainly business promotion and business preservation groups already in town, including private as well as city agencies that can certainly work together and then find ways to promote local businesses and help them preserve their customer base and continue to provide excellent service to our citizens.
How have retail and commercial development followed the increase in number of households in your district over time?
How has it followed?
Yeah, how has
increase?
How has retail and commercial development followed the increase in the number of households as your district have actually grown?
Well, I think the major growth again is Daniel Island and the Clements Ferry corridor. So I think we have to address that particular part because that's where the majority of the growth has occurred. throughout the city, this area has been one of the fastest growing and over the past 10 years, and nearly doubled, if not more so, in population growth over the past 10 years. And what's happened here is you have commercial areas here on Daniel Island. The downtown area, if you will, has built out, and occupancy rates are pretty high, and new businesses are coming in. And I think what the city has done is work with the Daniel Island Company and work with the businesses themselves to create a unified front in terms of conformity of the businesses. So obviously the areas look nice and are well kept. Down Clements Ferry corridor, you have Point Hope, which is where the cane Hoy plantation is being developed. And in that area, you have a major supermarket, you have a Publix there,
Yes.
and there are businesses that are growing. There's a gas station that's about to open in that area. And those services citizens need, and the city has provided or worked with developers to zone accordingly, and then the developers having their projects approved to meet the needs of the citizens.
You know what I want to ask you this, Shawn? I've been thinking about this for a long time, for many, many years, especially now that you're on Daniel Island. But what is the relationship with the city of Charleston and Berkeley County government?
Well, I think that they do work together, but I think there has to be it's a two-way street, if you will, in terms of communication. It's working with our county council member. It's working with the county supervisor in terms of promoting the ideas and the issues and finding ways where we can work together to fund major projects. Again, the county, with its penny sales tax, has repaved some of the roads here leading into Daniel Island. When you're coming off Clements Ferry and you're on St. Thomas Island Drive and Daniel Island Drive, it's repaved from Clements Ferry right up until you get to the first bridge, and then it stops, and then you have a bunch of potholes. I don't know the details of what happened with that project. I don't know if it could have been ended, but that would have been a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of construction and a project already underway and extend that into the city limits. Again, the county, Berkeley County, is repaving part of Seven Farms Drive up to the traffic circle. How can we work with county council to extend that to other areas? Are there ways? You have EMS and which is a Berkeley County EMS here on Daniel Island, and how can we implement the 911 emergency call center, which I know has been a topic that, again, our county, Berkeley County, has been working on these particular issues, and how can the city work with the county and vice versa to improve on some of those services that do indeed overlap.
How many homes in your district have been actually built at a fairly consistent rate?
In terms of a consistent rate, I've been on Daniel Island for 11 years now, and I think that there's been pretty consistent construction throughout as each area of Daniel Island has been built. Down Clements Ferry corridor, you have new developments that have been going up over the past 10, 11 years. You see them on a regular basis with new homes being built. Cane Hoy Plantation is being developed now. As it relates to downtown, again, there's not a lot of new homes being built downtown. Right. So I think you have to separate those two. I'm talking a lot about Daniel Island and Clements Ferry, mainly because that's where the development is.
Yes, sir. And there's a lot of nature out there, as you know. How do you accommodate the multi-use trails, wildlife areas, and low-impact drainage ideas by creating pockets of interconnected, protected open spaces that allows for interactions with nature?
I think you have to have a focus on recreation. You have to have a focus on on those nature trails. And the city ought to hold developers accountable for developing the parks and those open green spaces and the trails that they committed to as part of the master plan for the community. Again, using Daniel Island as an example only because it's the newest it's the newest example as a master plan community. We have a lot of wonderful parks. We have both parks that are owned by the city as well as parks that are owned by the respective neighborhood associations. We have trails that connect. We have boat ramps that are owned by the residents and maintained by the respective homeowners associations. The same thing should happen in the Cainhoy Plantation area, as well as all the new developments that are occurring throughout the city. That when these plans are created and a developer commits to this part of the development being a green space, we hold the developer accountable to meeting that requirement. And if it has to be done within a certain time frame, whether that is the occupancy rate, the number of permits that have been granted, that we make sure that those projects are built in a timely manner and maintained in a timely manner, so we don't have issues like what occurred here on Daniel Island, where certain agreements were made and committed to by the city, and they didn't occur. And when they did occur, it was a substantial change from what was part of the master plan, because what was agreed upon could no longer be accommodated based upon the development.
Yes, sir. I have to hold you accountable for a moment because I just went back on the city's website and you talked about obviously the masses and homes, but personal homes were especially exempted in the ordinance from what I just read.
Well, I tell you what, Quintin, let's talk about that offline because I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have the ability to pull up that ordinance right now, but I know it was on the website, and I'll be happy to share that information with you. And if I misread the ordinance and you're going to hold me accountable, I'll welcome that. One thing that I believe in strongly as a public official is to be held accountable and to tell you where I stand, and not to give you a mouth answer to a question that is an answer without really answering the question. We see that all too often from elected officials. But to be honest with you and tell you where I stand, and people can then agree with my position and agree with where my governing philosophy, or they can disagree, and that's okay. We can, you can't be all things to all people. And I think all too often you have elected officials who attempt to not want to answer the question because they don't want to be pinned down, they don't want to be held accountable, and they always want an escape route. And one thing that I promise to you and to every resident within Charleston City Council is that you'll know where I stand. I will answer your questions. I will answer phone. I will answer my emails. I will be accessible to you. You will see me out at meetings. You will see me at public events, and I will be transparent in my thoughts and take your input and your considerations into account in every decision that is made on City Council. So I appreciate that, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that offline since I know we're limited with our time here today.
Yes, sir. And this might be a redundant question, Shawn, but would you be in favor of establishing a state-of-the-art connectivity system that connects the residents and visitors to the top attractions in your district and those recreational spots?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Visitor Center has that as part of its promotional materials. I think the city tourism department does the same thing. How we can improve on that, I would certainly be interested in that. I don't know what proposals are out there that address that particular issue, but I do know that we have agencies in place that promote our local attractions, and if we need to do more of it, we need to do a better job at that particular area. I would certainly be all for that. Charleston is a wonderful city. It's a top tourist destination for a reason. We can continue to promote that. That benefits our local businesses, as well as shows off what truly makes Charleston a beautiful place.
Speaking of businesses, Shawn, and you just talked about tourism. Let me talk to you about the carriage industry. How do you protect the carriage industry going forth in the future?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is, work with the carriage industry, talk to them on a regular basis. It seems like the carriage industry is constantly under attack. And the owner of one of the carriage industries, carriage companies, he and I have been trading phone calls so we can talk about this particular issue and find ways to to address the carriage industry, because it's an important part of downtown. I believe the carriage business owners want to provide a high quality service. I believe that they want to be good stewards of the city because they're part of the face of the city. But it's also working with those folks just to make sure that they can maintain their business, that they do so in a responsible way. But rather than constantly being under attack, it's how can the city also defend the carriage industry as it relates to the treatment of horses. We have ordinance in place that deal with the treatment of horses, and if they're violating those ordinances, they should be held accountable for the violation of those ordinances.
Has the city defended the carriage industry enough in your mind?
I think that's a hard question because the attacks come from public groups, right? And so sometimes when the public groups are attacking the carriage industry has to carry its own water as it relates to fighting back. What I think the city can do is promote the carriage industry. It's it's part of the face of downtown. Some of the pictures that all tourists take are going to be of the carriages as they go throughout the city, showing off some of the beautiful architecture and historical sites of downtown. So I think what the city can do and what the city should do is make sure and can say the carriage industry is abiding by the ordinances. They are doing what they are supposed to do. And if those ordinances need to be revisited, then we ought to sit down with the parties that are vested in that business, the carriage business owners, and let's make sure that we're doing what's right, so it's attainable and sustainable for them to continue to provide a wonderful service that obviously the people that come to Charleston take advantage of.
And let me go back over to Daniel Island, because obviously that area, as you know, is growing a whole lot. But how should the city plan to slow outward expansion of city limits and focus on making necessary changes within the city limits?
You broke up a little bit. Did you say how can the city? I'm sorry. Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. You broke up. Sure. How should the city plan to slow outward expansion of the city limits and focus on making necessary changes within the city limits?
Quintin, I think I lost you. Are you still there?
Yes, sir. I'm still. Well, let me ask you this like this. As far as expansion, how should the city plan to slow outward expansion of the city limits and focus on making necessary changes within the city limits?
Well, there are, I think what the city should do, and part of the reason why I'm running, Quintin, is I don't think the city is focused on its essential services. I don't think the city is focused on its core functions. I think the city has focused on certain political agendas as it relates to how it governs and the issues that it tackles. The city should be focused on public safety, on making sure our roads are paved, our bridges are sound, making sure that the necessary fire departments and police stations are built and maintained. Here in Cainhoy, we had a new fire department or fire station come online a few years ago that will service the needs of the city residents along the Clements Ferry Corps. We obviously have a substation here on Daniel Island, but we have to make sure that the city focuses on those core projects and throughout the city. As it relates to, again, District 1, as the city develops, not so much grows in terms of land expansion as it develops this area. It's making sure that the infrastructure is in place for roads, that we have the roads that are needed, the proper roads, the drainage is addressed. And I know that flooding is not a major issue here in District 1, but it is in other parts of the city. So let's focus on how we can address the issues that are in front of us, those core city functions as it relates to providing necessary public services rather than focusing on political agendas and divisive issues that really shouldn't be part of the city council agenda.
And I have two more questions for you, Shawn, but let me ask you, is a smaller scale commercial development ideal for your district?
Is the
Smaller scale commercial development.
I think with the areas that have been developed and are being developed here in this part of Daniel Island and Plymouth Ferry corridor, yes, I think the small scale commercial to and from those commercial districts are important and have been created. Again, just using Daniel Island as an example, most of the commercial activity is limited to a small part of our community, and the businesses are there. They can walk to and from restaurants for lunch. We have a shopping center that is right here in the center of Daniel Island. You're going to have the same thing with the Cane Hoy Plantation there at Point Hope, where you have they're still building that out. So I think it's just continuing to monitor that those smaller commercial areas, and then making sure that they're providing, that the businesses are providing the services that the residents need. And then if we need to develop other areas, we make sure that there's some coherence as it relates to building each particular commercial district. Using Daniel Island as an example only because it was a master plan community. That area has been largely developed, and it serves the citizens and the residents well. And I believe the same thing will occur with the Cane Hoy Plantation based on the development that is currently underway.
And I have to run over to my next interview, so I can't talk long. But what will you do, in one word, what will you do on day one if elected?
On day one, I will bring a conservative voice to City Council and make sure the City Council focuses on providing essential services to its citizens and not be driven by political agendas one way or the other, but make sure that the city focuses on its core function. That's my message throughout this campaign. That will be my focus when I'm on City Council. And that's what I will do from day one and every day after as it relates to my governing philosophy as a member of City Council.
Shawn Pinkston, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's always good to see you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise.